Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Score podcast, the podcast where we offer our opinions on film scores and the films they're inspired by. I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Score. I'm Chris Lott.
And I'm Leslie Lott.
Today, we're going to be talking about Jaws. Now, before we actually get into this, since this is our first episode, how about we talk about a little bit about the podcast and what we hope to do with the rest of it and kind of who we are. Leslie, you want to start that?
Absolutely. So I'm married to wonderful Chris Lott, as you just heard his beautiful voice. And we've been married for over 5 years. We've been together for over 8. And Chris and I met a long time ago, and we discovered then that we both had a passion for music and music scores. My background, it's all over the place, but I am a geologist, but I do play the flute. I play the flute, the oboe, and the saxophone. I haven't played in some time, but I used to be an outstanding flute player and almost went to school for that, but instead I chose geology. So I do have a musical background.
All right. Well, yeah, and she's being very modest. She is very good. So since she is a classically trained musician, I am not. But I am a film composer. I've been doing this for 17 years now. That's a while. I got my first job back in 2003. It was a Halloween fan film, and I've always been a huge fan of film music. And one of the first soundtracks I ever bought was the soundtrack to Hard Rain by Christopher Young. I love that score. That is one of my all-time favorite scores, aside from what we're about to talk about today.
I think my first score that I ever bought was actually The Patriots.
Really?
Yes.
That's also John Williams.
I love The Patriot. It was such a great score. And then right after that, I bought The Mummy.
The Jerry Goldsmith one?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so also this podcast, the way we're going to do this, now clearly we're not experts. So with this podcast, we're just offering our opinion.
And we're not going to critique the score itself. That's been done by so many critics, and that's not why we're here. We're not here to critique the score. We're here to actually compare the score to the movie to see if it actually works, or if it doesn't work, or what we might suggest that we feel like would work better.
Again, our opinion. This is all this is. This is just our opinion, all for entertainment. Also, once we're going to talk about the score itself, kind of, I guess judge it a little bit on how it works just as a listening format. And then we're going to talk about the film, how it works for the film based on 3 different criterias.
The first criteria that we're going to look at is if the score actually works for the film. Chris and I often talk about it when we watch movies, how some scores really work and how some scores actually make the movie more horrible than it already is. So we feel like that would be, the cornerstone of our review, is whether or not what we're hearing is actually working for the film itself.
And the second criteria will be some of the best parts of the film with the score. Like, basically like the best scene with the best music and everything else.
Our favorite piece, maybe.
Right. And then the third criteria is what could have been done better, if anything, really. Could the score have been better? Should there have been a more score, less score, that type of thing. So how about we get started? You ready?
Fantastic. Let's do this.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about Jaws based on just the score alone, but I'm going to give a brief history on the film itself. Jaws is a 1975 American thriller film directed by Steven Spielberg and based on Peter Benchley's novel that was released in 1974. Now, Jaws basically started the trend of summer blockbuster. Nobody had any idea that this film was going to do the massive success that it did.
I remember my parents talking about watching it in a theater when they were dating. It might have been even before they got married, and how it actually made them afraid to go to the beach. They saw it on the big screen, and they're like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "For the longest time, Mama would say, I don't want to go into the water." I mean, it did its job. It was a thriller. It scared the audience quite
Yeah,
well.
tons of people. I to this day I still hear reports of how Jaws scared people into going into the water, and it did. It frightened so many people when it came out, and that was largely due to John Williams' theme and the score itself. Now, when Spielberg came in to talk to John Williams about the score, he sat down, he played the two, very famous themes. Do 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 do. Spielberg thought it was a joke. He literally thought he was just joking around, because apparently John Williams was known for a lot of impractical jokes, or just joking around with
And
Spielberg.
I can't imagine John Williams being a jokester, but to each their own. And I think it's very humorous, the fact that he would play jokes on people.
Right. And so Spielberg, initially thought, okay, okay, this is a joke. But John was, no, 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 no. Just hear me out for just a moment. I mean, he sat there and was just like, so he started playing it, and he just kind of kept going, kept going. And the more he played, the more Spielberg was like, okay, I see where you're going with this. Okay, this is great. And then it got to the point where John Williams told Spielberg, he said, this is a pirate movie. This is, yeah, there was a killer shark but it's more adventure, it's more piratey. It needs a pirate theme, so he started playing the pirate theme for Spielberg right then and there, and that's what kind of gave the score, this fantasy or adventure.
And it does. And when we get to the score portion of the segment, we will talk in depth about that. But there is this whimsical kind of elements, especially when you see them on the vessel, or on the quest to go kill the shark. And that was one of the first thoughts that ran through my mind. It's been a long time since I've seen Jaws, so this was kind of a refresher for me. But yeah, it was it was really very whimsical. Reminded me almost Goonies, like when you see them on the boat, or when they're tying knots, or
Yeah,
they're doing all that adventure stuff.
and that's crazy because Goonies came out years later, and but a lot of the success is due to just two little notes that John Williams created, and Spielberg himself even says, I think the score was clearly responsible for half of the success of that film, and I would agree with that. I would, because I'm not. I don't want to talk, we'll get to that later. So for the score itself, we listened to it for, over a period of several days. And there were several different albums available on Spotify, but the one we listened to, it was released in 2000, I believe, from Decca Records. And it was a longer, expanded version of what was originally released. Now, there was another album that was available that was released by Joel McNeely. Is basically a reorchestration of the score, and now there's subtle differences here and there, but it was basically the same score with just more updated instruments than what was available in 1974 or 75. So the one thing I can say from the very start of the score, there is a huge sense of dread throughout.
And he used those iconic two notes as a theme song for the protagonist. And typically,
Right from the start,
right
too.
from the start, even in the movie, we will get to that. He used that theme, just popped up, immediately. So you got that feeling that piece of the score was associated with the protagonist. But when I listen to any type of music, be it classical music or musical scores, I like to try to visualize what's going on, in that particular scene. And it was very easily done in Jaws. Granted, I've watched the movie beforehand, listening to score years ago. But to me, it was easy, especially when you start hearing that deep, voices that he used to symbolize the shark moving through the water. But he put it together in such a way where it wasn't dragging. It didn't slow down. You actually could sense the motion of the shark in the piece, especially at the beginning. It was just,
Right.
to me, it masterfully done.
Well, it gives you a sense of, hey, something's wrong. There's clearly there's terror in this water, and I it was the best way to give the villain of the film, essentially the main character of the film. I mean, because the film is called Jaws, and that's who we're following. We're following the shark, and it was a beautiful and well done theme for the villain. I mean, because there's a lot of times, which we'll talk about that later. There's a lot of times you don't see the shark, so the music is what kind of gives you the sense of, hey, there's something wrong. There's something coming. There's terror. There's dread. There's death
But,
fixing to approach.
John Williams is a master of creating these themes for these movies that are very iconic because, let's talk outside of Jaws just for a brief moment. You've got Indiana Jones. As soon as you hear the theme song Indiana Jones, that's Indiana Jones.
Right.
Or even for Star Wars, you hear that opening credits for the Star Wars, that is Star Wars. So you have a masterful composer that is so excellent at creating memorable pieces to these, iconic characters, and Jaws is one of them. I mean, I remember marching in high school, and it was Baker Band Hits the Beach was our theme song, or our theme rather, and Jaws was part of that program. And so, I remember marching to Jaws on the football field.
And it makes sense. I mean, because a lot of John Williams' scores have this march, this parade, and for Indiana Jones, it is the Raiders March.
Raiders of the Lost, yeah.
And it's the Raiders March. So that makes sense. And that was one of the things about this score that right from the very beginning, you like I said, you hear dread.
But, he did such a well job, as I said before, because anytime you start using those lower registers, it can drag any piece down, drag the song down. But he didn't. He put it together in such a way that it had movement, and you can actually hear the movement as the shark moves away, or as the shark, gets closer. You can actually feel that in the piece. But he also balanced it with those whimsical part, as we were talking about before. There was a nice balance there. And the transitions were not bad at all. The transitions were great, from this ominous, deep voices to these little light, airy, sweet pieces that he would have in there.
Right. And you're talking about the lower register parts. Case in fact of this one track right here, the Pier Incident. It has this, big movements, the lower notes, but they're very prominent, very known right then and there. And then it kind of starts drifting off, but it never goes away. It's still there. It's, dum, dum, bum, bum, bum. It's just barely there, and it keeps going, and then all of a sudden it just comes back, huge. It's like bum 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 bum. I mean, just like right there in your face, and it's like something is coming. The shark is coming after you, and you can hear it with the music.
And it's that balance of the tempos and the tones and his tonality that is just amazing.
Right.
That you can feel it. You can feel the piece. In my opinion, you could tell the protagonist is this big, heavy, lofty shark in the water easily, just
Right.
by even listening to the whole score. And I thought it was amazing.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
Now, there's another piece, Ben Gardner's Boat, and it starts off. It doesn't start off horror. It's more of a fantasy element. It's got these nice sounding harp with light, strings kind of coming in, kind of just, a very fantasy, whimsical element. And then there's this one part, it just one little hit, and it starts going dark. Right then and there, it's like something's wrong. What's fixing to happen? Is the shark fixing to come out? Are we fixing to hear the dum, 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 dum? But you never do. It's just, you get to that point where you're listening to it. You're just like, when's the theme going to happen? When's it going to hit? And then it gets hit with this higher registering strings. And then it's kind of like a big scare moment, and you can hear that, and it's like, and the music just starts. Then you slowly hear it. And see, it's not forceful. It's like the shark was already there. It's letting you know with the music. It's already done its business. It's gone. And I thought that was great to do that with the music. I mean, it was brilliant. It really was. It was awesome. Now another track was the montage. This is for when the townspeople are coming to Amity Island and everything else. Watching this scene, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, but hearing this music, I was like,
it did kind of seem out of place, because you hear these heavy voices, and then you hear this light whimsical piece that you could pretty much guess that something was going on, maybe vessel-wise or adventure-like, and then you have that piece, and you're like, this is really out of place. This doesn't seem right.
It goes back to the marching element that we were talking about, that John Williams is really, known for. But it sounds almost regal in parts.
Yeah, it did, and we'll get to that when we watch the movie. But I noticed that it almost had this kind of royalty feeling to it, and to me, it was just. You
know what it made me think of? Listening to a couple of the horn elements and stuff. It made me think of English, like a London,
like an English court.
Yeah. It made me think of London a little bit. I was
listening
to it.
It's funny because isn't it supposed to be like New Jersey?
No, it's New York.
Oh, New York.
Yeah, it's taking place in New York. I thought it was
so it's like as far away as you can get
right.
from England.
And that's why I was kind of like, okay, this is a little different, but it sounded great. I mean, I still was like listening to it, kind of bobbing my head, and like, like, okay, this works. And I love the way it ends. I mean, it's just like, it gets really, really high, and like, and then it just like, that's it, we're done.
We're done here.
We're done here.
No more.
Yeah, no more. We're done. Another piece that I put down on my notes was the father and son piece. Now, the way this piece started off, it's almost like you can feel the weight of the character through the music. I mean, you can just feel the I guess you could say
emotion.
Yeah, the tranquility, the despair. There's a lot going on, and you can feel the weight on this guy's shoulder.
And, and that is a sign of a masterful composer, to be able to capture feeling and music. And I know, since you're a composer, oftentimes when your clients come and ask you to write a piece of music and they can't really convey what's in their mind, and you're like, yeah, I need to know, dude, what you're thinking about.
Right.
I can't, can you sing it to me? I need to have some idea, what you want in this piece. And it's hard for them even to convey it in words. But for them to convey it in music, it's something special.
That tells you right there, John Williams knows what he's doing.
He does. He's a master. We're not disputing that.
No, but it was the way, the transition he had for this film, for this score piece, sorry, where you could feel the weight of the guy, the weight of everything, what's going on. You can hear that through the music, and it was so well done. And then the nice transition that there was, that was there. It goes from the weight of the guy, weight of everything on the guy's shoulders, to this very light piano, and it's very playful. It's very nice, but it's still there's a hint of sadness in there.
And yet you can tell that piece was dedicated to the son,
right?
And the innocence of a child. I agree. It was really well balanced and masterfully done, as the rest of the score.
And then later in the score, that's when the bigger the bigger action pieces start to happen. There's this, you got the, the shark theme, dum 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 dum, and then this, I want to say, an adventure theme comes into play, and I thought that was great. It's very big, it's very in your face, but at the same time, it's not dread, it's not terror like the shark. You get a sense of heroism with this new theme that's introduced later on. And I thought it was brilliant. And the transition to that in some of the score pieces later on, where you got the shark theme blending in with the adventure pirate theme, it was just almost seamless. It really was. It was like you go from dread and terror to very lighthearted, whimsical to heroic action adventure back to the dread and terror.
But if you think about it, when you start to listen to all these little elements, it's really reflective of how people are in general. We are complex characters. And so, I mean, you're talking about a shark movie where you have fear, you have happiness, you have, suspense. And he was able to capture all of that in his music.
Right. And like you just said, it's a shark movie. You never would have thought to hear this type of music for a shark movie. So now we're going to move on to the segment where we've watched the film and we've sat there and, kind of looked at different things. And that's when we kind of judge it on 3 different criterias.
Which we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But our first criteria we're going to look at is, does the score actually work for the movie?
Oh, definitely.
And,
even Spielberg himself even said, the success of this movie would not have worked without the music.
And, I totally agree. And we're not going to critique John Williams' score, because that's been done and he's won awards for it. And
well, yeah, I mean, because he won an Academy Award for this
yes.
film, and it was his second, win when he won this, and he himself has even accredited that Jaws kind of jump started his career, and it really did, because after Jaws, I mean, he went on to Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and then continued to work with Spielberg.
Superman.
That was another one. And now listening to the score while watching the film, you can see
he gives it a different element.
It really does. And to be honest with you, I really do not think I could ever see this film with a different score.
It's funny that you said that, because I sat there and tried to visualize that during the movie. I was like, okay, now what if we put a different score in with this movie? Would it be successful? And I don't think it would be as successful. Granted, I mean, Jaws was a great movie. It's iconic. Some of the lines are kind of hokey in it, but I think that's
just her opinion. I don't agree with it.
Yeah, whatever. I think it was a sign of its time, but I honestly feel that the score itself escalated the movie to a whole new level in a good way. It didn't take from the movie. I think it nicely added to the movie. As I mentioned before, it starts immediately with that theme song, and that theme, for the protagonist, which is the shark, carried throughout the whole movie. So anytime you saw a scene with the shark in it, or a scene where the shark is coming, or where it's going.
You say that's really interesting, because there's this one scene. It's supposedly the whole town thinks that they've caught the shark and everything else, when it's not in fact the shark that was killing everybody, which we know that because the film's still going. But it is in fact it's just a tiger shark, and so Brody and all the other people, they're trying to, they got like shark spotters, they're trying to find the shark, and you see this shark fin start bobbing through the water after the people, and and it scares the entire town, so they run back on the beach, and he's got this iconic shot of the mayor standing there, everybody's running out of the water back onto the beach and everything else. There's no music for this part, but then you see this woman off, and she's like, shark, shark, yelling, there's a shark. Then the music comes back. So for the fake shark, there is no music. And that should be kind of a clear signal to the audience right then and there. Hey, this ain't the real shark. It's a fake shark, And then when you get to the pond, the music starts up. That's when it's the clear
And it was
signifier.
really effectively placed in the movie. So whoever the sound designer was at the time, I mean, he took this masterpiece that Williams created, and he was able to put it in the movie in such a way that it amplified the movie tenfold, in my opinion. And then, one of the things that stuck out for me was there's absence of soundtrack. Granted, nowadays when you listen to a score or you see a movie, it's got an associated soundtrack with
Right.
it or music or whatnot. But to me, it stuck out.
There was a lot of moments in this film where there was no score.
There was no score and no soundtrack. And I think it stuck out to me because it was a nice balance between the score and no music, because the pieces in the movie that didn't have any music, it amplified the feeling.
Right.
It didn't take away from the scene. It did its job. And it was a nice balance there. You could hear the dialogue. You could actually, even sense what the characters are feeling. It was just, to me, it was masterfully done, well balanced. But it did stick out, the fact that there was no soundtrack, no background songs, because they have songs all throughout movies these days.
Yeah, and I'm not really too sure if that was like, maybe it was the time period. I guess they were doing it a lot back then. I'm not too sure.
Well, in the old movies, they didn't really have a score. I mean, a soundtrack rather. So, especially like if you had Gone with the Wind, I think part of that was played in front of a live orchestra. So, I mean, we will talk about that in, a later episode, the history of scores and soundtracks in movies. But I just think that to me, it just stuck out because of how it amplified the scene.
Especially the scene like where Quint, he's telling the story of the USS Indianapolis. Which, fun fact, there's a USS Indianapolis movie with Nicolas Cage that I was a background actor in.
Oh, yeah, you could see him too, man. He's up front. It's like, oh, there's Chris.
Several scenes.
He came home with a crew cut. I told him before he even got on set that this is a time period piece that they'll probably cut his hair. He's like, I don't know about that. And he came home with a crew cut. So I told him so. And he looked so funny.
So that tells you right there how much how much of a fondness I have for Jaws, because that's how I found out about the story of the USS Indianapolis, was by watching Jaws, and I never really paid attention to the score for that scene. It's not the typical reminiscent music, like the character's reminiscing about his past. No. There's terror.
Nothing, but there's nothing.
No, it starts off with nothing. Then if you listen very closely, I mean, because it was barely noticeable,
very soft.
But the score that is there, it's very horror driven, because the story that Quint is telling is horrible.
It's a horrific story,
and I mean, and more horrific that it was true. But it was the way Quint was telling the story. You could tell there was true horror behind what he was saying. Now, I actually know that Robert Shaw rewrote a lot of that dialogue. He went back and rewrote it himself. He's just sat down right there on the boat of the Orca and rewrote the lines, and then handed it to Spielberg and said, "Here, this is what I'm gonna do." And I thought that was great. But that right there was no Jaws, dum 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 dum. It was very creepy sounding almost, especially if you listen to the score itself for that piece. It was crazy. It really was, and especially to hear that it was John Williams that made that.
Well, what I really liked is the fact that they touched upon the USS Indianapolis, which was horrible. I mean, it was a horrible event in history, and you did have a lot of people that died because you had this massive shark attack. But they also touched upon the shark attack that happened in 1916, and off the shore there.
Now, I believe that was the basis of the novel.
Yes. It happened off the New Jersey shore. 4 people were killed during that incident. Also, a 10-year-old boy was killed when that happened. And but they touched upon it sometime in the movie when they were on the beach, and they were telling the story about New Jersey shore being attacked.
Right, when they
with
were
shark
trying
attacks.
to convince Mayor Vaughn to, hey, you need to shut the beach down because, there was another incident like this, in I think he said 61. Is that what it
Yeah,
was?
there's only 2 incidences in, I think, recorded history of sharks attacking massive amounts of people at one time instead of, picking individual people off.
Right.
I don't want to sound horrific, but that's how it was.
Well, I mean and the line in the movie where it's basically a perfect killing machine. It just eats, swims, and makes little sharks, and that's true. That's all this thing really. That's all they really do, and again, that's what John Williams conveyed with the music. He conveyed that sense of nightmare,
He did,
basically.
and he did a great job. And I was thoroughly pleased with the score and pleased how they placed it into the movie. So, to answer that first question is whether or not it works for the movie. In my opinion, it does. It works for the movie.
Now we're going to move on to our second criteria, which is some of the best parts of the film with the score. To me, it's the pier incident. I love that score piece and I love that scene. There was times watching it on VHS. Shows you how old I am. I would sit there and just rewind this one scene because it was the two idiots on the pier with the holiday ham. No, roast.
It was a roast.
Sorry,
It was
holiday,
their wife's roast.
Sorry, the holiday roast.
Their
Big
wife's
fan, big
roast.
fan of this movie, and I screwed that up. Sorry, holiday roast, and so yeah, and they take a big metal hook and throw through the roast and throw it in the water, and they just tie a chain to the pier, and then I think they have a hook to a tire. Yeah, they're using a tire.
Yeah, instead of, when you go fishing, you have a bob on your line. No, they had a tire for their bob.
Tire. So, yeah, the roast is dangling in the water and everything, and the tire is the floaty. And then the shark takes it, and that's when the music kicks in. Dum, 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 dum. And you got this really tense moment, and all you see is the pier drifting off into the water because, the shark has got the chain, and the chain's wrapped around the pier. So you see these, like, two pier poles, kind of like bobbing out of the water, going drifting away, and the music kind of drifting slowly, and dying out, but it never goes away, it never stops. Also, the pier turns, and that's when the music just gets right in your face, and bum, 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 and the guy's trying to get out of the water, and I was like, the music for right there, I would just sit there and rewind it just to hear that one part again, where the music would just get right back in your face again.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a good piece and good part, but I secretly laughed when I saw the pier come back to him. And to me it was just very, very funny, and I felt really bad doing so, but he's trying to get out of the water, and here comes this pier, and it's coming back to him.
It's the pier.
I know, it just, but they did a good job because they did not show the shark, and if I remember correctly, they did that on purpose when they made the movie, because they felt like if they showed the shark, it would take away that element of that scare tactic that they were trying to go for.
Not only that, the shark didn't work half the time. I mean, and that is true. In the behind the scenes, Spielberg, and I mean, Bruce the shark did not work 90% of the time. The shark never worked. They would go on radio and say, "Oh, the shark's working. The shark's working. I repeat, the shark is working. Let's shoot." And there was one scene like later in the film where the boat even sank, and the sound guy. Spielberg said he'd never forget where the sound guy is like holding the DAT recorder out of the water. Screw the actors, save the sound. And I mean,
I think I remember watching that in the commentary one time.
Yeah, it was hilarious. So what was your best part of the film with the score?
I'm gonna have to say my best favorite part. There's several that I really liked, especially like anytime they were like on a mission to go kill the shark or tie knots. That whimsical type of music that we were talking about at the beginning, I thought was wonderfully done. But I think my favorite part was when they killed the shark, when he finally died, and all of a sudden that ominous theme switched. And it switched to almost this harpy type of heavenly music, and you knew that,
something like that.
Yeah, so you knew that that was resolved at that point, and I think it was a really, really well done, showing that okay, the shark is really dead now because the music stopped.
The terror is gone.
That's right.
Okay, now we're going to move on to our third criteria: is what could have been done better. Nothing.
To me, nothing. I'm not going to try to make up stuff that
No.
could be
I
done
mean,
better.
we've talked about this. It's in record books now. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating on that point. It is in record books. Because like I said, this film started the summer blockbuster. This is the quintessential summer blockbuster film. This is what started it right here. I mean, people are coming in droves because of this movie. So nothing could have been done better. I mean, and this is just my own personal, opinion on stuff. Like a couple of the parts with the xylophone or something, and you hear it in the score, like diddly diddly. I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah, but that's
I've never been a big
Williams.
fan. Well, it's not
John
really just.
Williams really likes those runs and those little.
No, the flute runs are fun. I'm talking about the xylophone runs. I was not a big fan of the xylophone runs. I think if he'd had the flute runs, maybe he just hadn't gotten to that point yet in his scoring.
His talent.
Right, yeah.
Database.
And he was trying something different. I mean, because he really put himself out there for this score. It's just whenever I've heard the xylophone runs or whatever in a score, I'm just like, I could have made something
You're like,
better.
I don't know about this.
Especially with Jaws, it's such a serious moment. It's such a serious story,
It was a serious
film.
story, but there were some hokey moments where you're like, why are they adding humor here?
Again, this is where we disagree on stuff because the dialogue was perfect. I
don't
don't know
think
what she's
so.
talking about. I don't know what she's talking about.
I don't think so.
No. Dialogue was perfect.
Okay, whatever. You believe what you want to believe.
All right, so we both agree. What could have been done better? Nothing. Truthfully, the score was a masterpiece, and it
will stand the test of time.
It will.
Years from now, you can play those keys at the very beginning of Jaws, and anybody who loves film or has seen the movie will know that is from Jaws. That
Exactly.
will never change.
No. And there's a lot of times, like now, I'll listen to a modern score and I'll hear, somebody do something, and you hear those notes, and I'm like, that's Jaws. That's the Jaws theme.
Well, I read where they were talking about that key and that element and how it is a primary method. So, it's very symbolic of a person breathing, for example, in and out, in and out. And they felt like, that is one of the reasons why it was so successful, because that is suspenseful. It does build suspense, and then he built upon that and made the score. So
Right.
It was well done.
It was really well done. I could not, like we said this before, I could not watch this film without that score.
Yeah, I tried to visualize another score in there. It just did not happen. I'm like, yeah, no.
And being a composer myself, I would sit there and try to think of, okay, how would I score this differently? And I can't. I cannot picture this film without John Williams' music. So does it work for the film? Yes. We mentioned our best parts. What could have been done better? Nothing. This score is a masterpiece.
And I agree.
So thank you guys so much for listening. This is like I said, our very first episode. We will be doing more and everything else. If you want to, you can catch us on our social medias. We have a Facebook page. You can catch us Measuring the Score, at Measuring the Score. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and you can also send us an email. If you got a score that you want us to talk about, a film you want us to talk about, send us an email, measuringthescore@gmail.com. Leslie, you got any closing thoughts or anything?
No closing thoughts. I do want to add that periodically throughout our seasons that we'll be putting out, we will do a showcase for composers. So it won't be music-based, but it will be a showcase on a particular composer. So we'll talk about the history of their music, how their music maybe has evolved over time. There'll be kind of like historic, exciting historic pieces intermingled with, what we do.
Exactly. So for Measuring the Score, I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Thank you for listening.